Good evening and welcome to the Card Fellas podcast show. We are live. It is Wednesday night, 10:30, and this week we're talking some baseball cards. How are we doing tonight, Mr. Matt?
We're doing well. Yeah, we can. You can hopefully set your clock to our show. We've been on a good run here. Doing these live shows at 10:30 Central Time every Wednesday here on YouTube. If you're listening to us later on the podcast, but we've kind of stuck to this. You and I kind of talked during the week. Hey, what are we going to do? And both of us have these busy lives running around, but we always make time for our listeners. We always have time to talk about the hobby, where it's at. And today we're talking baseball, as you mentioned, 1993. But before you say, oh, the Jeter year, 1993 Topps finest baseball. This was a game changer when it came to the hobby and the era and where we're at with the hobby. And this one was a game changer, Chris. And, the more research and the more you learn about this set, the more you find out how unique it is. And the more you dissect it and get into it, man, this was an odd set, but definitely I would categorize as a revolutionary set for the hobby.
Yeah, for sure. 1993, I mean, we're basically kind of as the junk wax era, the sun is setting on it. Everyone is jumping out of baseball cards at this point. Kind of feels like 2022 to some extent, in that people are kind of bailing. A lot of people are happy about that, but anyway, I digress. But this was a set that was very different than what had been put out in the years previous. Only 4,000 cases of this stuff printed. A box had 18 cards with 6 packs. You got 108 cards in a box. You also got a box topper, which basically those look just like the regular cards, but they were bigger. And those, if you go on eBay, are still very popular. Those bigger things, I think, are difficult to store. But if you go online and put in 1993 finest, you'll see a ton of sales for them. But again, this was not junk wax, even though it was 1993.
No,
boxes are now selling currently between sales between May and tonight, June 2022, between $900 and $1,300 a box. Packs are selling for about $75 a crack. And through my research, it said that back in 1993, on the secondary market, that's what they were selling for at that time as well.
$3.99 retail, right? That was what they were supposed to be,
right?
And that's where kind of the market was set, and then people realized that there's a lot more value in these than previously thought, as you mentioned.
Yeah, we talked about this being kind of a revolutionary set and being a set that did something different than in the past, in that we had these chromium cards. It was the first, kind of the predecessor to chrome, but also refractors. So we have refractors in this set, and they say that there's less than 250 each refractor in this set. So super, super rare cards. And, again, in 1993, super rare wasn't something that really existed at that time.
Yeah, it really changed the game because, it was, you mentioned the 4,000 cases. And so this was hobby only. They didn't put this in retail. You mentioned the refractors, which were super short print. The number that I saw was about 241 prints of these refractors. When you look at the pop reports on these, I can tell you that number is low because there's one card that has over that. But I'd say around that 142 or 240, 250 of these cards exist. So they introduced the short print really for this. And so, and then that's really what drove the prices up, was people realized, oh my gosh, is there, they started to do the math. They go, there's not that many of these cards that are being printed. And so that changed the game, and it kind of gave us what we have today. And you mentioned the chrome look to it. That was something that was new. The refractors, parallels, and then just different looks within the set. So this was one of the cards. If you're watching us on the broadcast, this is one of the all-star cards, but this was Kirby Puckett's base card. And the difference between the all-star and the regular card was they had the chrome base card, but then the all-stars, which were cards, I think 84 through 116 were the all-star cards, and they had the green the green background to it. But the cards had the baseball's finest at the top, or baseball's all-stars finest at the top. They had the picture, good action photos on most of these cards, and then the name. No mention of the team, no mention of the position on the front of the card. And then you look it over in the back of the cards, pretty generic looking back. I would say unique, definitely a unique look for Topps. But when I look at the back, Chris, it's pretty plain. I like the picture, but not much for the eye to see here.
Yeah, Kirby's wearing his warm-up shirt there, showing off the guns. But, yeah, only 1 year of statistics and the career totals there. But, yeah, not a whole lot to see on the back of these cards. But the front, and we'll go back to that front picture there, Kirby, got that baseball kind of levitating there. I mean, really nice photography, and just the look of these. When you see them, you know what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
They actually ended up making kind of reprints of these cards, I think, in 2013, the 20-year anniversary. They did a kind of an insert set within the finest, and I think they did it again in 2018. So that's kind of shows you just how cool these are, is that 20 years later they're kind of still making the same look to these cards. But
mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got the Puckett there, and that's what the All-Star looks like. And again, earlier, if you look at the Topps product, usually you've got kind of the base card, and then you've got the All-Star card as well. In this thing, if you had an All-Star card, then you didn't have another card. That was basically one card for each player. It was a 199 card set. So
yes, 199 cards, and each card had a refractor, and this is what we're looking at now. And I picked a random refractor. I didn't pick a star, just to give you an idea that every card got a refractor. And the picture you're seeing, if you're listening to us on the podcast, we have a Ray Langford refractor card. And you'd look at it and go, why would you pick a Ray Langford card? Well, again, all of these refractors were super short prints. So even a guy like Ray Langford was a card that people would want, because they knew that it was super short printed. And the reason I picked this card specifically is I think it showed really the shine, the shimmer of the refractor, which was extremely important, because nowhere on these cards, the back, front, designated them refractors. So, they had the Topps Chrome, the new Topps Chrome usually has refractor under the number, or but this didn't say that. So you really had to examine the card and go, is there a rainbow shine to it? Okay, that's a refractor. And so that was one unique thing about this set, that when you opened a pack, you really had to kind of inspect the cards a little bit, especially the green cards, the All-Star cards. Those were tough to find, to pick out which ones were refractors and which ones weren't, because they had so much color on the card. And so just another unique part about this set.
Yeah, those refractors, there's lots of stories of people finding those in quarter bins, because whoever pulled the card didn't realize, or maybe probably not so much pulling the card. There was only one refractor in a box, but
easy to
someone
miss.
had a bulk lot or something, and they just missed the fact that it was a refractor, and they ended up in a lot of these cards end up selling cheap. And you actually see it once in a while on eBay if you're really keeping an eye on things. People will list cards and not realize that they're refractors, and they go for really, really nice prices.
Yeah, if you can find those. And actually it got me thinking the reverse too. People were labeling them refractors, and you couldn't tell online if they were or not. So somebody could be trying to pull a fast one on you on a raw card. And so it really when I was looking on eBay for some of these cards, that was the one thing I noticed on the green ones. They were labeled as refractors, and they were going for pretty good money, and they weren't graded, so they're raw. You couldn't tell that these were refractors with the green borders unless you're able to look at it and see them and inspect them. It'd be hard for me to buy a raw card of these from this set on eBay. I just would have a hard time spending money to do it. But yeah, as you mentioned, so these were they also had the All-Star cards, the kind of the box toppers, the jumbos, and so yeah, good variety on this package of cards and sets. As you mentioned, these boxes are still really high in demand, and not many for sale on eBay. I think I counted one right now currently, and it was about $1,600. And so that was for a sealed box. So it tells me that these aren't, a lot of these cards have already been opened, and there aren't that many out there. And when we dig into the pop report, I think that kind of shows that a lot of these boxes have already been opened.
Yeah, there's one up for sale right now. I think you're right; it's like $1,500. But when people are putting them up at auction, they are selling basically anywhere from $900 to about $1,300. But like you were talking about before, and I think a lot of times people just post cards and they kind of copy and paste another listing that they see, and a lot of times they're just uneducated. And they don't realize, they see that big price and they hope that that's what they got, and they put it up there. I'm sure there are people out there trying to rip off people, but I think a lot of times it's just uneducated people trying to sell something, and they see that big price and they want their thing to be that thing. But the other thing and we saw it a little bit if we go back to the Puckett card, you see the lines, and we see these things in Chrome cards today. You see kind of those lines through it.
Yes.
There's just a lot of printing defects in these cards too, which I'm sure when we get into that pop report, you're going to tell us about very low gem rates. The centering on these cards wasn't great either.
No.
Just a completely new thing, to be printing, and there were lots of issues coming off the line too. So if you have dreams and hopes of pulling a PSA 10 refractor out of your 1993 finest box that you're going to pay $1,400 for, those dreams and hopes might be dashed.
I think they're definitely going to be dashed, and you can see them, those printing lines, because we've collected and opened a lot of Prism cards. And and there was a lot, or Chrome cards, and you see those lines just right through the card, and you can see these lines on the cards. I was watching a couple box openings on YouTube, and you could definitely see when a guy was pulling the cards and the reflections, you could see really, really bad lines. So the pop report, you're going to see a lot of 8s and 9s, very few 10s, and it's because of that. And like you said, I think the centering's another issue. The Chrome stock usually held up pretty well. The corners are sharp, the edges are nice, but man, those printing lines and the off centering really killed this set. Yeah.
Let's take a quick look at baseball back then. 1993, the Toronto Blue Jays won their second straight World Series. John Olerud led the American League in hitting that year, .363 average. Paul Molitor was the World Series MVP that year. The Blue Jays also had guys like Joe Carter, Roberto Alomar, Jack Morris. The year before, they had won with they had Dave Winfield on the team, let him go. But they ended up picking up Dave Stewart that year, too, was a really good starting pitcher for him. This was the first year of the Rockies and the Marlins. Tim Salmon from the Angels won the American League Rookie of the Year. That's about 20 years before another fish from the Angels, a guy named by Mike Trout, would win it. Isn't that weird?
Yes.
Tim Salmon and Mike Trout, both Rookie of the Year winners for the Angels.
Yes.
That's just crazy.
It's an interesting observation, but it turned out well for those guys, at least their rookie seasons.
This was the final year of just 2 divisions in each league. They went to the 3-division system the next year, with the Central Division being added in each league. And of course, the next year, 1994, we had the strike shortened season, which some people believe gave rise to the steroid era. So kind of an interesting time in baseball. And I think one thing we haven't talked about with this set is all the great rookie cards, because there really aren't any great rookie cards.
I was waiting for you to drop something. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think they're very good rookies in this set at all. I mean, the 93 set, every one of them has Derek Jeter in it, right?
Right.
So you think, okay, maybe this has no, it didn't. There were 2 rookies in this set.
Yeah, JT Snow and Mike Lansing. I think JT Snow was another Angels guy.
He was, yes.
Yeah, and Mike Lansing, I think, was from Seattle. So
nice careers. They had good careers, but they weren't anything, no Hall of Fame career. I think there were 33. I counted 33 Hall of Famers, eventual Hall of Famers in this set. And then you had other desirable, guys from the hobby that people collect. Your Bo Jacksons, your Mark McGuire's, your Barry Bonds. They all have cards in here. Your Don Mattingly's. So this set definitely, even at 199 cards, no rookies, really had some really, really solid players in it. So it wasn't like it was a complete wash of a set just because it didn't have those rookies. So, but the Ken Griffey Jr. card is probably the most notable, I would say. If you look at the pop report, it's the one that's the most graded. I'll get into the numbers a little bit, but Griffey cards from the 90s, early 90s. I think this card looks pretty cool from the back. I mean, the front is okay. I wasn't a big fan of the green. I liked the silver better, and but I like the back of the Griffey card. It was a nice looking card. Then Nolan Ryan, he was in this set as well. And Chris, and Nolan Ryan card is, Nolan is a always a hot commodity, no matter what year he's from.
Yeah, Frank Thomas won the MVP that year in the American League. This is his card, but yeah, even today, you go out and sell, junk wax era. You can take a 1988 Fleer Nolan Ryan, put that into the solds and eBay, and you'll see people paying $2-3 for that card. So when we're talking about finest stuff, it brings pretty good cash. And I think I actually took some values down on some raw cards in this set. What they've kind of recently been selling for. That Nolan Ryan card going for about $15 to $20 right now, raw. The Griffey raw, anywhere from 40 to 100, depending on what condition it's in. But speaking to the affordability still of this set, you can pick up that Kirby Puckett card we started the show with for under $5. So if you're a big Twins person and you want to just do a little sampling in this set, the base Puckett cards is about a $5 card. So
the one Puckett, so the one card I did see on eBay, maybe you saw it as well. There's a Kirby Puckett 10 PSA 10 refractor for sale right now, and there's 4 days left, and it's up to $510. Nice. So that card is one that's interesting to watch, and I didn't see many PSA 10s refractors for sale or sold, and that was one that kind of gave me a baseline. So with 4 days left at $510 and many bids on it, it's not a buy it now. That one that's auction, it has many bids. I have a feeling that one's going to get above 1,000 and probably keep climbing after that, given the low pop that card has. I think there was 17 10s. Right. So that's a low number for a Kirby Puckett, gem mint card.
Yeah, I actually did some price samples of the refractors at the PSA 9 level. Tony Gwynn recently sold for $599. That's a refractor at PSA 9. A Griffey PSA 9 recently sold for $4,700.
Wow, what?
Yeah.
Okay, so my Puckett range, that thing's going to go through the roof then.
I'm going to say that your Puckett will sell for more than a Gwynn, but I think that $1,000 mark is probably about right.
So a PSA 9 Griffey sold.
Oh, you're talking about 10, yeah, with a 10 Puckett.
Yeah,
I think you probably will be. I would say probably around the 2,000 mark with a 10. I'd say a 9 probably 1,000. A 10 you're probably going to be close to 2, but we'll find out.
What was the Griffey number you said again?
The Griffey PSA 9 recently sold for $4,700.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's a lot more than I had anticipated for that card. But again, it just speaks to it speaks to the scarcity of these cards, and I think just the availability of them. There just wasn't that many for sale. on eBay. And I think a lot of people are holding these or we're collecting these, and this is part of their personal collection or their the set registry. I think that's another. This is a perfect set that you can pull together. And so I think that's what happens.
I've got a couple other ones I think are super interesting. Another PSA 9 refractor, Andre Dawson. And again, he was a league MVP
much
in
beloved
87,
too.
And he was a guy that the Cubs, his beloved Cubs player.
Mm-hmm.
That one just sold for $419. And then here's an interesting one, Terry Pendleton refractor.
I saw this one.
Yeah, sold tonight for $110.
Yes. So you start seeing Terry Pendleton PSA. It was at 9 or 8.
That's a 9.
Yeah. That was a 9. Okay. And that's the crazy thing about these cards. And when in doing the research, they some of the articles that were written about it were like, don't be surprised if the Mickey Templeton card refractor is getting a lot of bids. And so I'm like, why is this? And then you start diving into these numbers and you realize, Chris, you and I talk about it all the time. Well, frisky low pops, my friend. Like, this was the set for frisky low pops. And we go back to what we originally said at the beginning, those $75 per pack price tags back in 93. Think about that. Like, that's an obscene amount of money to be spending on a pack when people are coming out of the junk wax era where they're spending virtually nothing on packs. And so now you imagine walking into your local hobby shop and seeing a pack for $75. That's like you're going to get whiplash, go, whoa, because I just don't think people were expecting packs to be that expensive. And I don't know how many packs were sold during that time or if just dealers opened it. Like, I think that might have been something that happened, given the fact that when we dive into the pop report, there's some really interesting findings here. But my gut tells me, and this is, again, I think the hobby people that were owning these hobby shops, I think they realized we're sitting on some potential gold here. Why don't we just rip them and get them graded?
Yeah,
that might have happened.
It very well could have. And I think mainly not so much we're sitting on gold, but the fact that they were buying it direct and probably could buy, instead of buying off the secondary market. Because one of the other things that I read looking through this is that there was a lot of pushback against Beckett for the pricing that they put out on these cards, because people were seeing them at $75 a pack. And then they're talking about, a Kirby Puckett card being worth $3. And they're like, well, how does this make sense? Because we're talking about one of the biggest stars in the game, and it's going to cost you $75 to open a pack to maybe get one. Right. So there was a lot of Beckett pushback based on what these card values were showing. Today we can see real time what cards are actually selling for, instead of a group of people kind of deciding what they should sell for. So that was an interesting dynamic too. So I think you may be onto something in that the dealers opened it, but I think a lot of it could just be, they were able to buy it at much more reasonable price than a consumer could, just because they were buying at the regular price rather than the secondary market price. So
yeah, and I think that's and that's once people started to realize it, maybe more people were buying it than I expect. But I just think at that point in the hobby, I just don't know how many people would be willing to spend $75 on a pack at that time. But you're right. I mean, what the dealers were paying for it was virtually nothing, because I think Topps Finest, the folks at Topps had a recommended price tag of $3.99 for these packs.
Right.
And so I think once they the dealers started to do the math, they were probably cracking these boxes themselves. And with the number of cards that were being graded and that have been graded, it tells me that the people who were buying these or had these cards were savvy enough to get them graded at a very early stage in the grading. This was not part of the more recent pandemic boom. These cards have been graded for a long time. And so I think that's I think that's what tells me that these are in the hands of dealers, or were in the hands of dealers, and now probably have been sold, via eBay or at a card show or wherever the case may be. But if you're ready, Chris, I'll hop into some of the pop reports, and they do tell some stories. If you, unless you have some things you want to dive into.
Yeah, I just want to share another sampling of pricing. These are PSA 10 base cards. So the PSA 10 of Griffey, which I'm sure you're going to tell me how many there are soon. That's card number 110, recently sold for $585. A Frank Thomas, number 102, PSA
these are
10.
So these are
base.
Base.
So these are not refractor. These are base.
Got it.
Yeah. Frank Thomas, $145. And then I just kind of picked a couple of other guys here. Darryl Strawberry just went for $67. And then a McGuire and a Clemens, they both sold for about $60 each.
Okay.
And when you compare those at PSA 10 to something like just the regular tops of that year, you're talking about 3x price roughly. And when we get into that pop chart and we get into just the overall, the amount of cards is far less. There's really some great value there when you really think about it compared to other cards from that year, and especially from that era. To be able to pick up those PSA 10s at that price is a pretty phenomenal deal, honestly.
There aren't any cards. There isn't one card. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. There is not one card from this set, base card or refractor, that has over 100 PSA 10s. Yeah. So that tells you right there, everything is a frisky low pop when it comes to 10s. And there are only, let me see, three cards that have over 50 10s. And so you're talking about the potential to have these cards at a really, really low gem rate. And that's $60 for some of those cards, $50. That's a pretty good price for a card that doesn't have a lot of competition when it comes to PSA 10s.
Yeah, and a lot of, like I said, if you compare that to regular tops, it's about 3 times that price compared to the regular tops. And if you even take a tops gold, it's about 30% more, and there's far fewer of these than there are gold. So if you're looking to invest in some 1993 baseball cards at the PSA level, I don't think you'll find a better deal than this stuff as far as buying something that not only is cool and has demand and has some history, but I think, just has some real scarcity.
Yeah, and we've talked about this too, with the new influx of cards coming into the hobby with the pandemic. I don't think this one moves very much. No, I just don't think there's enough. There's not enough product to get that influx of cards to change the pop report very much. And so the numbers that you're seeing are the numbers that are probably going to be here for as long as the hobby and PSA are around. So right. Yeah, you're buying into the frisky low pop, and it's going to stay a frisky low pop.
Yeah, and a lot of people, us included, we got into like in those 1990 Fleer basketball, and when we were submitting, the pop reports were super low, and everybody else jumped into, and now those reports are just crazy. But the other thing I can tell you, even with 1990 Fleer, that report is not going to grow like it has over the last 9 months. Nope. PSA is now down to like a month or 2 left in the backlog. So those reports are going to start holding a lot more steady than they have been over the last, 11 months. So that'll be a change, I think, too, for a lot of people. I don't see that pop report growing as quickly as it has over the last year. So.
And I think, one of the things that, Chris, you and I've talked about, just kind of off, not really on the broadcast or the podcast, is kind of our own personal habits and how we're collecting right now. And you and I are really looking at parallels and numbered cards and, those unique, true short prints. And it's a little bit of a, the short prints and the numbered cards are a little bit of a fugazi right now. I mean, we've talked about, the true one of ones. We've had those conversations, and, there's there's these cards that are numbered to 99. Well, there's also cards numbered to 50, of the same player, numbered to 25, numbered to 10, numbered to 199, numbered to 133, 156. It's like you have all of these cards of the same player numbered. And so it's not quite the same as like true short prints. And these are true short prints. And so, when we start thinking about like how do you find those, this set definitely has that. And if you like some of these players, and I think there are some guys in here that if you're a baseball fan or were a baseball fan, this is a great set to target. Like a 93 Topps Finest Barry Bonds, Kirby Puckett, Roger Clemens, Dwight Gooden, Eric Davis. I'm naming some guys who are, they were superstars for years, but maybe not some of them Hall of Famers. And then you have Hall of Famers, Greg Maddux. Like I said, 33 of them. There's the Mark McGwire card. Excuse me. McGwire, obviously not a Hall of Famer. There's Bo Jackson's in this set. A lot of people chase Bo Jackson. Always has value. We talked about the Nolan card. We talked about the Griffey card. So I think there's a lot of potential in this set to try and find cards that you can snake away and just hold on to. And I think if you ever go to sell them or need to sell them, there's going to be a market for them because there's just not a lot of competition.
Yeah, for sure. And if you can find those refractors too at a great price, I think that's a great deal too. I think I read somewhere there's only 3 sets of these in the PSA registry.
Oh, so interesting. Okay.
So people that are looking of the refractors, people that are looking to, move up in this PSA registry thing, which to a lot of people, including me, it means absolutely nothing. But, to the people who are really crazy about collecting sets, just holding those refractors, even if they're common players, will have some value just because people are searching to do that kind of thing. So let's get into that pop report. I know you're dying to tell us about it. So let's
So here's kind of my theory on why I think dealers had these cards, is because there's a lot of these cards that have been graded. So there's been 34,000 of these cards graded. And for a short print type of product, that seems like a lot to me. And so I went and I did the math, and of the 34,000 that have been graded, 25,000 of those cards are the refractors. So 70% of the graded cards are the refractor cards. And that tells me that the people who had those cards knew they were short printed, wanted to make sure that they got them graded so they can add the value to them. That tells me that's a dealer move. And they probably have been sitting on those cards since 93. I don't know when grading started, Chris. I don't know when PSA opened the door to grading, but I'm sure that these were some of the cards that they sent in early on in the days of PSA, because 25,000 of the 199 cards in a 99 card set are refractors that are being graded. So it tells me the people who did this were savvy. They knew. And that's why I believe it was the dealers that held these cards and got them graded. The number 1 card graded in this set is the Ken Griffey Jr. base card. It's only been graded 835 times. So as a set, when you look at the number, any set that has fewer, the number 1 card fewer than 1,000 times graded, that's a pretty low pop set. Only 97 tens. So when we talk about the rate and the idea of these chrome cards, they hold up well. Only 97 of those are tens, and 479s, 208s. So my guess is the Griffey cards probably off center, probably some printing lines, and then the refractor for Griffey, 226 grades. So that means there's at least 226 of those cards out there. There's only 42 tens. And so that's the card you were talking about in a PSA 9 selling for $4,700. There's 109 of those. So if you wanted a high-end Griffey card, there's only 150 of them. You're going to pay pretty significantly. The second most graded base card, Nolan Ryan, 485. His refractor was graded only 115 times. So that tells me that in what I read in some of the research that I did, you could buy a case of these and you could get the same refractor out of those cases. It sounds like the collation wasn't great case by case. So you could get the same crappy player in a refractor. And those were your refractors. I can't remember if it was refractors were like one per box on average. It was like one out of every 19 packs. I think it was. Was that the number? That's about one per box.
One per box, correct.
And so,
and you're right about the collation on the refractors too. And I think that's another one of those deals where, you open a case and get a Ray Langford refractor, and guess which boxes you're going to be selling. Get rid of those and start opening cases till you find the Nolan Ryan or the Griffey.
So here's where things get a little bit more clear, or more specifically unclear, about how many refractors there truly are. So the Frank Thomas base card is the third most graded card. There's been 318 of his base cards, 64 10s. Now, his refractor card has been graded 296 times. So there are at least 296 refractor prints of the Frank Thomas card. So I know that number, the math was 240. That's what kind of everybody thought how many of these refractor prints are. But the Frank Thomas card tells you there's at least 296 of his. So, but that's the highest. So of all the refractor cards that have been graded, Frank Thomas at 296 is still a significantly low number of prints. So if the math was 241 by, when you talk about the cases and the number of packs and the fact of the matter is fewer than 300 of these refractors are probably out there for all of these cards. So I think that's probably your more, that's probably the more official number. But I assume there are also Frank Thomas refractors that are not graded. Mm-hmm. So you'd have to think there's between 300 and 350 of these refractors. But maybe, and I could be wrong here, maybe they've made more Frank Thomas refractors than they did of the Ken Griffey Jr. refractor.
Yeah, so I've seen
definitely possible.
There are, among these refractors, there are some short print ones, and it's due to the way the sheets were laid out.
Sure.
In that some cards were on two different sheets and some were only on one different sheet when they made the refractors. So there are, I believe there's something like 30 cards that actually had fewer than the 241. So that 241, I think, was an average number. Mm-hmm. But there is some discrepancy in that. At least that's kind of what I read. Obviously, I wasn't there when they printed the stuff, but those are some of the notes that I took when looking back at this set.
Yeah, that 241 number only showed up twice, and it was Mark McGuire actually has 241 refractor cards graded as well. Mm-hmm. So that number checked out is at least, so that tells me there's more of his, there's more of the Frank Thomas. Other than that, everybody, every other card has fewer than 241, which is kind of that magic number. But again, that's an average.
Right. And the other thing that we got to note is that, we use these PSA numbers, and we both believe, and I think most people believe, that PSA is kind of the leader in this. But, there are cards that are graded from Beckett and cards that
Sure.
are graded from other places. So there's that 241 is an average, and there are cards that there are more of, and there are cards that are less than. But no one really knows. I'm sure there's somebody back at Topps that was around in 1993 that could probably tell you exactly, but I think that number is around 241. But I would guess, somewhere between 400 and probably 150 would be about a good number to throw out at you.
Yes, and like you said, it could vary. It could be completely, a variation from player to player. There might be a guy who has just 100. and there might be a guy who has 450. So it's really an interesting time, because with in the research that you do, Topps never refuted any of the the numbers. They never confirmed, they never denied. They just said, this is how many cases we shipped. And people did their own math, where again it's just it was a different time. If they would have put a number on the back of these, which started to show up, you and I both had these cards, the Donruss cards. Remember the ones that were true numbered cards to 10,000? I can't remember. The Donruss Elite, weren't they? Is that like
you had the Donruss Elite. You also had the Leaf Gold Stars, and I hold a Ken Griffey Jr. Leaf Gold Stars PSA 10, and that was numbered to 10,000. And again, think if you numbered cards to 10,000 today, they'd probably laugh you off the street. But
right
at that time, that was a big deal. And the thing is, there were so many of those printed, and so many cases printed, that they believe that like half of those cards are still in packs somewhere in people's closets. Like they just haven't even surfaced yet, because there's so much of that stuff printed back then.
If they would have put a number of, if they would have put 204 number to 241 on these cards would be these cards would have it would have blown up the market at that time. I think that's one of the things that is is fascinating about this set. And the more research you do, this turned the corner. This for the hobby, and it really changed the game. And by this time, Chris, personally speaking, I was out of the hobby. I think this was not something, I was not doing this anymore. And so I this was kind of this dead era for collecting for a lot of people, including myself and you as well, I think. And when I got back in I think I got back in for a brief time in like 98, 99, 2000. I started to discover numbered cards, parallel cards, jersey cards, auto cards, and just how much the game had changed. And really, this was kind of the beginning of that. And so when you look at the pop report and you see that a majority of the cards graded are the refractors, you go, boy, that kind of reminds me of a time, right now, where base cards aren't, nearly as valuable as they once were, and not sure if they will ever be valuable over the long term. But the parallels and the unique cards that come in these packs and sets are the ones that you really have to collect if you want to, have a good investment for the future.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, I did some work on the Google machine while you were talking. PSA first started grading cards, along with Beckett. Both started in 1991.
Okay.
I don't believe that it was probably a very popular practice. I know, if you go onto the blowout forums and you kind of see some of the people who have stuck through the hobby through all the years, you'll kind of see people say, yeah, we started to do this kind of around 2000.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of when things started picking up in that type of thing. I think that's about when people started really doing it. But I dug out my collection. I had a very similar arc as you did. I kind of 93, 94 was kind of the last year, and took 5-6 years off. Got back in 2000, and when I pulled out my collection, I had a handful of graded cards in there. Nothing like super awesome in there, but just some graded cards that I'd picked up at shows, just because I'm like, hey, what is this thing? I kind of want to buy that and see what that's all about. So I did have some old slabs. I have a Mon Green rookie card that I'm currently selling on eBay for $5 if you're interested.
That's me telling Matt to go back to 2000 and buy more graded cards.
Right.
Go back there.
Go back.
Hey, Chris, buy more. 2000, buy more.
You only have to go back to like 2019.
Yeah, that's true.
Go back to 2019, buy everything you can, and then sell it in February 2021. And we would all be sitting on beaches right now.
I would like to go back to 2000, but I'm just a little more greedy than you. I understand year 2019, but I'd like to go back to 2000, buy all these PSA cards, hold them till 2021, and unload them. And like you said, I'm on a beach someplace.
I just came up with another podcast idea, which is we're going to call it Time Machine. You can go back to a certain year and tell me what you're going to buy. And if I'm going back to 2000, I'm buying all the football product I can get my hands on.
And that's what got me back in the hobby. You actually, you know what? You and I were we were in the same city. We're working together, and I think you and I kind of got back into it at that same time.
Yeah.
For me, it was Randy Moss. And then, so you had Randy Moss, you had the Peyton Mannings, you got, that era, Tom Brady, but it was Chad Pennington, Tim Couch. We collected a lot of those guys, but that was really what got us into it. Right. And so, to your point, give me all that football. And you could find all that football at Walmart and Target. This is like Shopko. I remember going there and just buying boxes, and it was, and you could find Topps Chrome, you could find all those products during that time. And I think the reason I got out of it at that point, clearly, I mean, we had jobs and we didn't get paid very much, so we didn't have a lot of money just sitting around. But I think what happened was it became so overwhelming, and that's also part of the what maybe people didn't like of the Topps finest set in '93. It was like I just want cards of the players that I don't need these fancy shiny cards, and I don't need these short prints. It was such a different way to look at the hobby, and I think the purists were probably put off by this. And I know when I got back in the late 90s and 2000s, it was like, wait, there's Upper Deck, and then there's Upper Deck Encore or whatever it's called, and then there's Upper Deck, there's MVP. And it's just like, what am I supposed to collect? It just became too confusing. And I felt like an idiot walking into a local card shop and just being like, what do I even want here? And so, I think, that 93 Topps finest, the set we're talking about here, it might, kind of kick that era off. And that's the era we're in right now.
Yeah. Well, even Topps, I think, didn't think it was going to be a big hit. Obviously, they didn't print a ton of it. They didn't do a whole lot as far as explain to people what this refractor thing was. They expected it to sell for $4 a pack. It was selling for much more than that. Right. So they obviously didn't see it coming the way that it did either. So I think it was a surprise for them. But yeah, it kind of did start off this cascade of different things that were happening that ended up happening in the hobby with parallels. And yeah, I remember, electric diamonds and silver signatures and all that kind of stuff to come along right after that. So, I think these are all answers to the junk wax era. And it was a kind of a card companies, I think, knew what was going on and knew that they had to come up with some solution to it. And this was kind of it.
They did. And they did need to figure something out because people were getting out of the hobby, right? And that was part of it. And they needed to figure out a way to entice people back in and get people that way. And so, kudos to them for thinking differently. And it did, and it changed the game. It completely changed the game, and it's the game that we know now, and we've come to learn and expect, and just be here to live with. But at the same time, they still didn't get away from the base cards and the cards that people could buy if they were set collectors, because I think that's one of the things too that when we grew up, you were trying to build a set. Right? I think that's what you kind of did. You bought a bunch of packs to build a set. Right. And that was kind of the old school way of collecting. And so when you start throwing some of these variable cards in here, I think it kind of probably turned some people off, and it just changed the game. And looking back, it might have changed the game for the better, because it did. It introduced something different, and then brought more value to the hobby as well, because these cards are, as we've mentioned throughout this broadcast, pretty scarce. And that's kind of the way we want our cards to be now. And those are the ones we brag about. Look what I pulled. Look what I have. It's this, these rarities that pop up in the hobby.
For sure. Well, I think we can put a bow on it. We've hit 50 minutes, and I had not that many notes tonight, so I thought this might be a half-hour show. But we're almost to an hour.
It's never going to be a half-hour show with you and me, Chris. We talk and talk and talk. We can put anything on the board and talk for 50 minutes.
For sure. And that's the way it's cracking up. So I think we can put a bow on this, call it a night, and we will see everybody next week here live. And hopefully, I know you and I are both in this just middle of a world right now. We're both incredibly busy with home life and work life, and kids are at home. And but hopefully we can put out a couple shorties between the next few weeks here. But definitely see you next Wednesday.
Indeed. And yes, we do have to get on that and start filling up the podcast for folks. And we'd love to hear your feedback, whether it's on YouTube, whether you're listening to us on the podcast feeds, wherever you get us. Leave a review, leave a comment. We love to hear from all of our listeners, because we have some of the best listeners. They give us really good feedback and really good questions. So love to hear from you. So hope you guys enjoyed this one. Topps 93 Finest. And one of the things we didn't mention about this, it didn't have the Peel sticker on it yet. And they, the Topps Finest, they eventually did that, which was annoying in itself, but we didn't have to talk about it because that wasn't part of this set. But we're going to leave you with that. I'm Matt. He's Chris. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.